Chapter 1 New Year, same Bruce Hamilton had never been one for resolutions. They felt like promises made to strangers. Grand declarations shouted into the void, destined to be broken before the first snow melted. He preferred quiet certainties. Bills paid on time, groceries stocked, the front door locked before bed. Stability was his resolution every year, and he kept it without fail. The living room smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine, remnants of Christmas clinging stubbornly to the air. His mother sat curled in her favorite chair, knitting something in a shade of blue that reminded Bruce of summer skies. Across the room, his sisters, Emily, 21 and dramatic, and Sophie, 16 and perpetually scrolling, were sprawled on the couch, arguing over whose New Year's resolutions were more realistic. "I'm telling you," Emily declared, tossing her hair like she was auditioning for a shampoo commercial. "This is the year I go viral. TikTok fame, brand deals, the whole thing." Sophie snorted without looking up from her phone. "Your last video had like 12 views. One of them was Mom." "Quality over quantity," Emily shot back. "Besides, what's your big plan? More doom scrolling?" Sophie smirked. "I'm going to learn guitar. And maybe Japanese." Bruce, seated at the edge of the couch with a mug of coffee cooling in his hands, listened without comment. He'd learned long ago that his sister's ambitions were like fireworks, bright, loud, and mostly harmless as long as you didn't stand too close. His own ambitions were quieter. Keep the house running. Keep Mom from worrying. Keep the world from crashing in. Emily turned suddenly, eyes narrowing. "What about you, Bruce? Any resolutions?" He shrugged, sipping his coffee. "Same as last year." "Which is?" Sophie asked, finally glancing up. "Keep things steady." Emily groaned. "That's not a resolution. That's maintenance." Bruce smiled faintly. "Maintenance keeps the lights on." His mother looked up from her knitting, her expression soft but tinged with something Bruce recognized. Concern. The kind she tried to hide behind gentle smiles. "You could make a resolution for yourself, sweetheart. Something just for you." Bruce met her gaze, then looked away. "I'm fine, Mom." Emily rolled her eyes. Translation: "I'm boring." Bruce didn't argue. Boring was safe. Boring meant no surprises, no risks, no chance of letting anyone down. He'd been the man of the house since he was 9 years old, and men of the house didn't chase whims. They held the line. Outside, fireworks cracked against the night sky, distant bursts of color painting the darkness. Sophie leaned toward the window, her phone poised to capture the glittering explosions. Emily was already drafting a caption for a photo she hadn't taken yet. Bruce watched them both, a quiet warmth settling in his chest. They were happy. That was enough. 3 doors down, Denise Roberts was having a very different New Year's Eve. Her parents' living room was alive with laughter and the clink of champagne glasses. The fire crackled in the hearth, throwing golden light across the room as Denise perched on the arm of the couch, swirling sparkling cider in her glass. She'd spent the last hour dodging questions about her love life, but her father, persistent as ever, was circling back for another attempt. "So," he said, settling into his favorite chair with the ease of a man who knew he was about to win an argument. "Anyone special?" Denise groaned, tipping her head back dramatically. "Dad?" "What?" He grinned, unrepentant. "It's a fair question." Her mother chimed in from the other end of the couch, her tone gentle but curious. "You've been working so hard, honey. It's okay to want someone to share life with." Denise sighed, setting her glass on the coffee table. "It's not that I don't want that. It's just, every guy I meet is either allergic to commitment or thinks exclusive means, until the next swipe. I don't have the time or energy for games." Her father raised an eyebrow. "So what kind of man are you looking for?" Without thinking, Denise rattled off the list that had been living in her head for years. Someone steady, reliable, loyal, honest. The kind of man who shows up when it matters. The kind of man who, I don't know, makes you feel safe. She laughed at herself, dropping her head onto the table with a soft thump. "Basically, I just described you, Dad. Which means I'm doomed." Her father chuckled, exchanging a glance with her mother. A glance that spoke volumes. "You're not doomed," he said, his voice warm with amusement. "You might just be blind." Denise lifted her head, squinting at him. "Blind?" He gestured toward the fire. "Come on, let's sit and talk about life." She followed, muttering under her breath. "Dad, Mom already gave me the birds and bees talk when I was 13. Her father smiled, offering his hand to her mother like a gentleman. "We're not talking about birds and bees. We're talking about love and life." They settled in front of the fire, the glow painting soft halos around their faces. Her father leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Your mother and I have always had a policy. We don't interfere with your love life. Those choices are yours." Her mother added gently. "But every time you visit, you have the same complaints about different men. Maybe the problem isn't the men as much as why you keep picking the same kind." Denise opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. They weren't wrong. She flopped back against the couch with a groan. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong." Her father's smile was the same one that had carried her through every storm. "You've told us what you're looking for. but you keep ending up with men who have nothing in common with that list. Either you're sabotaging yourself, or you're ignoring someone who fits. Denise frowned. Ignoring who? Her mother's answer landed like a pebble in a still pond, sending ripples through the quiet. Bruce Hamilton. Denise blinked, then snorted, then laughed so hard she nearly spilled her cider. Bruce? Quiet, boring, loner Bruce. Her parents exchanged another glance, patient and amused. Her father said, "You know his story. You know what kind of man he is." Denise shook her head, still laughing. "I mean, sure, he's nice, but come on." Her father's voice softened. "He's not possessive, Denise. He's protective. A man like that would sacrifice his life for you. The question is, are you worth the sacrifice?" The words lingered long after the laughter faded. Denise stared into the fire, her thoughts tangled. Bruce Hamilton. She hadn't thought about him in years, not really. But now she couldn't stop. Outside, the clock struck midnight. Fireworks bloomed across the sky, bright and fleeting. Bruce watched from his porch, hands in his pockets, the cold biting at his skin. 3 doors down, Denise stood at her parents' window, her reflection framed by firelight and glass. Neither of them knew that the new year had already begun rewriting their stories. Chapter 2, The Conversation by the Fire. Denise had always thought her parents were the reasonable sort, the kind who offered advice only when asked and never meddled in her personal life. Tonight, she was starting to suspect that assumption was wildly optimistic. She sat cross-legged on the rug in front of the fireplace, the warmth licking at her skin as her parents settled into their usual spots. Her father leaned back in his chair like a man preparing to deliver a sermon, while her mother perched gracefully on the couch, knitting needles abandoned in favor of a steaming mug of tea. "Bruce Hamilton?" Denise repeated, her voice climbing an octave. "You can't be serious." Her father's expression was maddeningly calm. "Dead serious." Denise laughed again, partly because the alternative was screaming. "Dad, Bruce is Bruce. He's quiet. He's, what's the word? Stoic. Like a human version of a library sign that says, 'Please be quiet.'" Her mother smiled faintly. "And yet, you've never had a bad word to say about him." "That's because we've barely spoken," Denise protested. "Our conversations have been, what, hi, bye, and maybe nice weather if we were feeling adventurous." Her father chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "You know what I see when I look at Bruce? A man who understands responsibility. A man who doesn't run when things get hard." Denise frowned. "You make him sound like a superhero." "Not a superhero," her mother corrected gently. "Just a good man." Denise opened her mouth, then closed it again. She hated that the word good stuck in her head like a burr. Bruce had always been good, polite, respectful, the kind of guy who held doors open and said thank you without sounding rehearsed. But good wasn't exciting. Good didn't make your pulse race. Her father leaned forward, his voice softening. "You've been chasing excitement, Denise, and every time, it ends the same way." She bristled. "So now I'm supposed to settle for boring?" "Maybe boring is underrated," he said with a grin. "Besides, Bruce isn't boring. He's steady. There's a difference." Denise stared into the fire, the flames dancing like they were mocking her confusion. She wanted to argue, but the truth was, her father's words hit a nerve. Every relationship she'd had in the past 5 years had been a roller coaster, thrilling at first, nauseating by the end. Maybe steady wasn't such a bad idea. Her mother reached over, resting a hand on Denise's knee. "Honey, we're not saying you should marry him tomorrow. We're just saying, maybe give him a chance." Denise snorted. "A chance at what? He barely talks to me." Her father's smile turned sly. "Funny thing about that." Denise narrowed her eyes. "What did you do?" "Nothing," he said far too quickly. Her mother's lips twitched. "We invited Bruce and his family to dinner next weekend." Denise shot upright so fast she nearly knocked over her cider. "You what?" Her father held up his hands in mock surrender. "It's just dinner. Just dinner." Denise sputtered. "With Bruce? And his family? And you two sitting there like smug little matchmakers?" Her mother laughed softly. "We thought it might be nice. You haven't seen them in years." Denise groaned, burying her face in her hands. "This is a setup. A full-blown, textbook setup." Her father's voice was warm with amusement. "Call it what you want. But sometimes, life needs a little nudge." Denise peeked through her fingers, her heart thudding in a way she didn't want to analyze. "You're unbelievable." Her father grinned. "You'll thank us later." She doubted that very much. But as she sat there, the fire crackling and her parents exchanging smug glances, Denise couldn't shake the image that had popped into her head. Bruce, standing on his porch 3 doors down, his hands shoved in his pockets, his eyes shadowed and thoughtful. Quiet, yes. Stoic, sure. But boring? Maybe not. Across the street, Bruce was loading the dishwasher, blissfully unaware that his life was about to get complicated. Emily was perched on the counter, scrolling through her phone with the air of someone who had better things to do. "So," she said casually, "any big plans for the new year?" Bruce didn't look up. "Work. Same as always." Emily smirked. You know, most people your age are out partying right now. Most people don't have a house to run, Bruce replied, stacking plates with military precision. Emily hopped down, her grin wicked. You need a girlfriend. Bruce froze, a plate halfway to the rack. What? You heard me. She leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. You're 26, Bruce. You've been single since forever. It's weird. Bruce sighed, shutting the dishwasher with a firm click. I don't have time for that. Make time, Emily shot back. You're not 80. Bruce gave her a look, the kind that said the conversation was over. But as he walked away, her words lingered like an echo. He didn't have time. He didn't have room. And yet, for the first time in years, he wondered what it would feel like to want something just for himself. Outside, the night was quiet again, the fireworks spent, the air sharp with winter chill. Two houses, 3 doors apart, held two people staring into the same question. What if? Chapter 3, the setup. Denise had been ambushed before, by surprise birthday parties, by office potlucks where someone forgot to mention the mandatory part, but nothing compared to this. She walked into her parents' house on Saturday evening, expecting the usual cozy dinner. Her mom's roast chicken, her dad's bad jokes, maybe a glass of wine to take the edge off a long week. Instead, she was greeted by the sound of laughter. Multiple voices, not just her parents, and the unmistakable scent of conspiracy. Her mother appeared in the hallway, smiling like a cat that had swallowed a canary. Honey, you made it. Denise narrowed her eyes. Why do you look smug? Smug. Her mother feigned innocence. Don't be silly. Before Denise could press, her father's voice boomed from the living room. Denise, come say hello. She stepped into the room and froze. Bruce Hamilton was sitting on the couch. Not just Bruce, his mother, looking elegant in a navy sweater. Emily perched on the armrest like she owned the place. Sophie scrolling on her phone but clearly listening. The entire Hamilton clan, 3 doors down, now occupying her parents' living room like this was the most natural thing in the world. Denise blinked. What is happening? Her father grinned, spreading his arms like a game show host. Surprise. We thought it'd be nice to have the neighbors over. Denise shot him a look that could curdle milk. Neighbors? Really? Bruce stood politely, his expression calm but his posture stiff, like a man bracing for impact. Hi, Denise. She managed a smile that felt about as natural as a tax audit. Bruce. Hi. Her mother swooped in, linking arms with Denise and steering her toward the couch. Isn't this lovely? 2 families catching up. Lovely was not the word Denise would have chosen. Awkward? Yes. Transparent? Absolutely. She sat down, acutely aware of Bruce's presence beside her. Close enough to feel the warmth of his shoulder, far enough that she couldn't accuse him of invading her space. Emily leaned forward, her grin wicked. So, Denise, what's new? Denise forced a laugh. Oh, you know, work, life, the usual. Bruce nodded politely. Same here. The silence that followed was deafening. Denise scrambled for something, anything, to break it. So, how's work? Bruce's jaw tightened, like he was trying to decide if that was a safe topic. It's good. Steady. Steady? Denise repeated, her father's voice echoing in her head. Steady isn't boring. It's dependable. She shoved the thought aside and smiled. That's good. Emily smirked. Bruce works in logistics. He basically runs the world. Bruce shot his sister a look. I don't run the world. You keep things moving, Emily said, undeterred. Without you, everything would collapse. Denise laughed, surprised by the flicker of humor in Bruce's eyes. Sounds important. He shrugged. It pays the bills. Her mother clapped her hands. Dinner's ready. As they moved to the dining table, Denise caught snippets of conversation. Emily teasing Bruce about his non-existent social life, Sophie muttering about Wi-Fi, her parents exchanging smug glances like they'd already won. Bruce, for his part, remained calm, answering questions with quiet courtesy, his voice low and steady. Denise found herself watching him more than she intended. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. But there was something about the way he listened, really listened, that made her pulse skip. When her father launched into a story about fixing the old fence, Bruce didn't just nod. He asked questions, offered suggestions, even volunteered to help if needed. It wasn't performative. It was genuine. Halfway through dinner, Emily struck like a cobra. So, Denise, she said sweetly, any resolutions this year? Denise froze, her fork hovering midair. Emily's grin widened. Bruce says his resolution is to keep things steady. What about you? Denise shot Bruce a glance. He looked mildly amused, like he knew exactly what his sister was doing but had decided to let her burn. I haven't decided, Denise said finally. Emily tilted her head. Maybe you should resolve to go on a date. Denise choked on her water. Bruce handed her a napkin without missing a beat, his expression unreadable. You okay? Fine? Denise croaked, dabbing at her mouth. Totally fine. Her father chuckled. Emily's not wrong. You deserve some fun. Denise glared at him. Dad? Bruce cleared his throat, his voice calm but firm. Maybe we should let Denise pick her own resolutions. The room went quiet for a beat. Denise stared at him, surprised by the quiet authority in his tone. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't awkward. It was protective. Her mother smiled like she'd just witnessed a miracle. That's very thoughtful, Bruce. Denise's heart did a strange little flip. She hated that it did, but there it was. By the time dessert rolled around, Denise was exhausted from smiling and dodging questions. Bruce, on the other hand, seemed perfectly composed, his calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around them. When he stood to leave, he offered her a polite nod. Good to see you again, Denise. She nodded back, her voice softer than she intended. You too. As the door closed behind him, her parents exchanged a look that made Denise groan. Don't, she warned, pointing a finger at them. Not a word. Her father grinned. We didn't say anything. Her mother's smile was pure mischief. But you're thinking it. Denise fled to the kitchen, her heart pounding for reasons she refused to name. Across the street, Bruce walked home in silence, Emily chattering at his side. So, she said, her tone dripping with glee. Denise is cute. Bruce gave her a look. Don't start. Emily smirked. Too late. Bruce said nothing, but as he stepped into the quiet of his own house, he realized something unsettling. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about bills or schedules or responsibilities. He was thinking about Denise. Chapter 4 Sparks and Stumbles. Bruce Hamilton had never been good at small talk. He could discuss logistics, supply chains, and the merits of different inventory systems for hours but casual conversation. That was enemy territory, which was why, when he spotted Denise Roberts at the local coffee shop 2 days after the dinner ambush, his first instinct was to turn around and leave. Unfortunately, Emily was with him. Oh my God, Emily whispered, elbowing him hard enough to make him grunt. It's her. Bruce didn't look. Who? Emily rolled her eyes. Denise, from dinner, 3 doors down. The girl our parents and her parents are basically planning your wedding with. Bruce sighed. We're not. Don't even start. Emily cut in, grabbing his sleeve and dragging him toward the counter. You're saying hi. Bruce considered resisting, but Emily had the determination of a bulldozer and the grip strength of a professional wrestler. By the time he opened his mouth to protest, they were already standing behind Denise in line. She turned, and for a split second, Bruce forgot how to breathe. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, a few strands framing her face. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, nothing flashy, but there was something about the way she smiled, warm, genuine, that made the crowded coffee shop feel suddenly smaller. Bruce, she said, her voice tinged with surprise. Hi. Hi, he managed, his tone so flat he wanted to kick himself. Emily, of course, swooped in like a social butterfly on steroids. Denise, fancy seeing you here. Love your sweater. Is that cashmere? It looks expensive. Denise laughed, a sound that made Bruce's chest tighten. It's from Target. Emily grinned. Target is basically couture now. Bruce cleared his throat, desperate to steer the conversation away from Emily's fashion commentary. How's work? Denise's smile softened. Busy. Always busy. You? Same, Bruce said. Then, realizing how pathetic that sounded, he added, logistics doesn't take holidays. She chuckled. Sounds steady. Bruce blinked, the word hitting him like a pebble to the forehead. Steady. The same word his father had used to describe him at dinner. He wondered if Denise remembered that conversation. He wondered why he cared. Emily, sensing an opportunity for chaos, clapped her hands. You two should sit together. Catch up. I'll grab a table. Before Bruce could object, Emily vanished into the crowd like a mischievous sprite, leaving him and Denise staring at each other. Denise tilted her head, amusement dancing in her eyes. She's enthusiastic. Bruce exhaled slowly. That's one word for it. They ordered their drinks, black coffee for Bruce, caramel latte for Denise, and made their way to the table Emily had claimed. Except Emily was nowhere to be found. Just 2 chairs, 2 cups, and a note scrawled on a napkin. You're welcome. Bruce sat down, feeling like he'd been dropped into a rom-com against his will. Denise settled across from him, her expression curious but not unkind. So, she said, stirring her latte, your sister thinks we should catch up. Bruce nodded. She has opinions. Denise smiled. So do my parents. He winced. About dinner? About everything, she said lightly. Including you. Bruce's stomach tightened. What did they say? Denise hesitated, then shrugged. That you're a good man. Bruce stared at his coffee, unsure what to do with that. Compliments made him uncomfortable, especially ones that felt like they carried weight. I just do what needs to be done. That's not nothing, Denise said softly. Most people don't. Bruce looked up, meeting her gaze. For a moment, the noise of the coffee shop faded. The clatter of cups, the hum of conversation, all of it drowned out by the quiet intensity in her eyes. He wanted to say something, something that mattered, but the words tangled in his throat. Denise broke the silence with a smile. So, tell me, What does a logistics guy do when he's not logisting? Bruce blinked. Logisting. She grinned. You know what I mean. He considered the question, then shrugged. Mostly family stuff. House repairs. Grocery runs. Denise laughed. Wow. Thrilling. Bruce's lips twitched. I'm not very exciting. Maybe not, she said, her tone teasing but gentle. But you're steady. There it was again. That word. Bruce felt something shift inside him. A small, stubborn spark he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he knew one thing. For the first time in a long time, he wanted to keep talking. They ended up sitting there for an hour, trading stories about childhood, laughing over neighborhood gossip, and discovering that they both hated pineapple on pizza with a passion that bordered on militant. When Denise finally stood to leave, Bruce found himself blurting out words he hadn't planned. Maybe we could do this again. Denise paused, her smile slow and warm. Maybe we could. As she walked away, Bruce stared at the empty chair across from him, his heart thudding like it had forgotten its usual rhythm. Sparks, he realized, didn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes they came with caramel lattes and quiet conversations. Chapter 5 Coffee and Complications. Bruce Hamilton wasn't used to feeling nervous. He'd faced broken water heaters, tax deadlines, and Emily's teenage rebellion without breaking a sweat. But standing outside the coffee shop 2 days after his unexpected conversation with Denise, his palms were damp, and his heart was doing something suspiciously like a drum solo. He told himself it wasn't a date. It was coffee. 2 neighbors catching up. Nothing more. Except he'd changed shirts 3 times before leaving the house. And Emily had nearly fainted from laughter when she caught him Googling best conversation starters. Relax, she'd said, leaning against the doorframe like a smug little oracle. You're not applying for a job. Just be yourself. Bruce had grunted something non-committal because being himself had never felt like enough. Denise was already there when he walked in, seated at a corner table with a caramel latte and a book she clearly wasn't reading. She looked up as he approached, and her smile, warm, easy, hit him like sunlight after a long winter. Hey, she said. You made it. Bruce nodded, resisting the urge to check if his shirt was wrinkled. Yeah. Traffic was light. She chuckled. We live 3 doors apart. He felt his ears heat. Right? They ordered drinks. Black coffee for him, another caramel latte for her, and settled in. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Not awkward exactly, but charged. Bruce searched for something to say, anything that wouldn't sound like an interview question. Denise saved him. So, Emily told me you're basically the backbone of the global economy. Bruce blinked. She said that. She said you keep the world moving, Denise teased. Which sounds impressive. Bruce shrugged. It's not glamorous. Mostly spreadsheets and phone calls. Still, she said, stirring her latte. It matters. Bruce studied her face, the way her eyes softened when she said that. Most people dismissed his job as boring. Denise didn't. That shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. But it did. They talked for an hour, about work, about childhood memories, about the time Emily tried to sell lemonade for $10 a cup because she claimed it was artisanal. Denise laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink, and Bruce found himself smiling more than he had in months. But just as he was starting to relax, his phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Water heater leaking again. Emily says it's bad. Can you come home soon? Bruce's stomach sank. Of course. Duty never waited. He glanced at Denise, guilt gnawing at him. I'm sorry. I need to. Something came up at home. Her smile faltered, just a fraction. Everything okay? Yeah, he said quickly. Just house stuff. She nodded, but he saw the flicker of disappointment in her eyes. It hit harder than he expected. By the time Bruce got home, Emily was standing in the hallway with a mop and an expression that said, I told you so. Water heaters possessed, she announced. Also, you owe me for ruining my socks. Bruce sighed, rolling up his sleeves. I'll fix it. Emily smirked. You always do. Her tone was light, but the words landed heavy. He always fixed things, always showed up, always carried the weight. And for the first time, Bruce wondered if that was why he'd never had room for anything else, like sitting across from Denise without worrying about the next emergency. Meanwhile, Denise sat in her car outside the coffee shop, staring at the steering wheel. She told herself it wasn't a big deal. Bruce had responsibilities. She respected that. But a tiny voice whispered that this was exactly what her parents had warned her about. A man so tied to duty he might never choose himself, or her. She shook the thought away, started the engine, and drove home. But the question lingered like a shadow. Can a man who never puts himself first ever make room for someone else? Across town, Bruce tightened the last bolt on the water heater, his hands steady even as his thoughts churned. He'd left Denise sitting alone in a coffee shop. He hated that. He hated how much he hated that. For the first time in years, Bruce Hamilton wanted something that wasn't about responsibility. And he had no idea what to do about it. Chapter 6, The Interference Squad. Bruce Hamilton had always suspected his sisters were plotting against him. He just hadn't realized the scale of their operation until he walked into the kitchen on Sunday morning and found Emily and Sophie hunched over a laptop like two generals planning a military campaign. "What are you doing?" Bruce asked, eyeing the screen warily. Emily grinned, all teeth and mischief. "Research." Sophie didn't look up. "Strategic matchmaking." Bruce froze. "No." Emily's grin widened. "Yes." Bruce crossed his arms. "I'm not." "Dating?" Emily finished sweetly. "Yeah, we noticed. That's why we're helping." Bruce groaned. "I don't need help." Emily clicked something on the screen. "You do. Trust me." Bruce leaned over just enough to see what they were looking at, and nearly choked. It was Denise's Instagram profile, open and glowing like a neon sign of doom. "Emily," he said slowly, "why are you stalking Denise?" Emily rolled her eyes. "It's not stalking. It's research. We need intel." Sophie smirked. "She likes coffee, dogs, and hiking. You like coffee and fixing water heaters. It's practically fate." Bruce pinched the bridge of his nose. "Please stop." Emily ignored him, scrolling with the enthusiasm of a treasure hunter. "Ooh, look, she posted about that new Italian place downtown. You should take her there." Bruce stared at her. "I'm not taking her anywhere." Emily's eyes sparkled. "Not yet." 3 doors down, Denise was facing her own version of the interference squad. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming as she chopped vegetables, while her father lounged at the table with a newspaper and the smug expression of a man who knew he'd started something he couldn't be stopped. "So," her mother said casually, "how was coffee with Bruce?" Denise froze mid-sip of her tea. "How do you, Emily?" Her father chuckled. "That girl has a mouth like a megaphone." Denise set her cup down, trying to sound nonchalant. "It was fine. Fine." Her mother's tone was pure skepticism. "You were gone for an hour." Denise shrugged. "We talked." Her father lowered the paper, his eyes twinkling. And nothing," Denise said firmly. "It was just coffee." Her mother smiled like she'd heard that line before. "Honey, you've been complaining about men who don't listen for years. Bruce listens." Denise opened her mouth to argue, then shut it again. Because he did listen. Really listen. And that was rare. Her father grinned. "You're smiling." "I'm not," Denise lied, turning away before they could see the heat creeping up her neck. By Monday, the meddling had escalated to DEFCON 1. Bruce came home from work to find Emily waiting in the living room with a whiteboard covered in bullet points. "What is that?" he asked, dropping his keys. Emily beamed. "Your dating strategy." Bruce stared. "My what?" "Step 1, Emily said, tapping the board with a marker. "Text Denise." Bruce blinked. "I don't have her number." Emily smirked. "You do now." She held up her phone like a trophy. "You're welcome." Bruce's jaw tightened. "Emily, step 2, she continued. "Invite her to dinner. Somewhere nice. Not mom's meatloaf." Bruce groaned. "I'm not doing this." Emily grinned. "You will." Meanwhile, Denise was dealing with her own tactical assault. Her mother had started leaving subtle hints. Recipes for romantic dinners, articles about finding love in unexpected places, and most damning of all, a text that read, "Bruce is a good man. Don't overthink it." Denise stared at the heart emoji like it was a ticking bomb. She wanted to roll her eyes, laugh it off, pretend none of this mattered. But the truth was it did. Because every time she thought about Bruce, his quiet strength, his steady presence, her pulse did that annoying little skip. And she hated that she didn't hate it. By Friday, the interference squads had done their job. Bruce had Denise's number. Denise had Bruce's name stuck in her head like a song she couldn't stop humming. And both of them were wondering the same thing. What happens next? Chapter 7, A Walk Down Memory Lane. Bruce hadn't planned on texting Denise. He'd stared at her number for 2 days, thumb hovering over the screen like it was a detonator. Every draft felt wrong. Too formal, too casual, too something. Finally, he settled on the simplest option. "Want to take a walk?" He hit send before he could overthink it, then spent the next 30 minutes convincing himself she wouldn't reply. Except she did, 5 minutes later. "Sure." "When?" Bruce stared at the message, his pulse ticking faster than he liked. He typed back, "Tomorrow evening. Around the old park." Her answer came almost instantly. "Sounds good." The next evening, Bruce stood at the edge of the park, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, the winter air crisp against his skin. The playground looked smaller than he remembered, the swings creaking softly in the breeze. He'd spent countless afternoons here as a kid, pushing Emily and Sophie on those swings, watching over them like his father had told him to. He was still lost in the memory when Denise appeared, her breath puffing in the cold, her cheeks pink from the chill. She wore a navy coat and a scarf that matched her eyes. Blue, bright, impossible to ignore. "Hey," she said, smiling. "Long time since I've been here." Bruce nodded, falling into step beside her as they started down the path. "Same." For a while, they walked in silence, the crunch of gravel underfoot filling the space. It wasn't awkward, at least not for Bruce. He'd always liked quiet. But tonight, he wanted more than quiet. He wanted connection. Denise broke the silence first. You used to bring your sisters here all the time. Bruce glanced at her, surprised. You remember that? She smiled faintly. Hard to forget. You were always standing off to the side, watching like a hawk. Bruce shrugged. They were little. Someone had to keep an eye out. Denise's voice softened. You were a good brother. Bruce looked away, his jaw tightening. I was just doing what my dad asked. What do you mean? He hesitated, then exhaled slowly. Before he deployed, he told me I was the man of the house until he came back. I took that seriously. Denise's steps slowed. Bruce, he never came back, did he? Bruce shook his head, the familiar ache settling in his chest. No. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind rustled through the bare branches, carrying the faint scent of pine. Denise reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve. A light touch, but enough to make his heart stumble. That's a lot for a 9-year-old, she said softly. Bruce swallowed hard. It was what needed to be done. Denise studied him, her gaze steady. And you've been carrying it ever since. Bruce didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written all over his life. Every choice, every sacrifice, every quiet moment where he put everyone else first. They walked on, passing the old basketball court where Bruce had shot hoops alone after school, the bench where Denise used to sit with her friends, laughing about things he never understood. Funny how the same streets could hold two completely different childhoods. Do you ever wonder? Denise said suddenly. What life would have been like if things had been different? Bruce considered the question, his breath fogging in the cold. Sometimes. But wondering doesn't change anything. Denise smiled faintly. Practical as always. Bruce glanced at her, something tugging at him. A mix of admiration and frustration. You sound like you think that's a flaw. She shook her head. Not a flaw. Just maybe you deserve more than practical. Bruce didn't know what to say to that. He'd spent so long being steady, reliable, the rock everyone leaned on. Wanting more felt selfish. Dangerous. But as Denise walked beside him, her scarf fluttering in the wind, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to want something for himself. They ended up at the old footbridge, the one that crossed the narrow creek behind the park. Denise leaned against the railing, her breath curling in the air like smoke. Bruce stood beside her, his hands gripping the cold metal, his thoughts a tangled mess. This place hasn't changed much, she said. Bruce nodded. Neither have I. Denise turned, her eyes catching his in the fading light. Maybe that's not true. Bruce frowned. What do you mean? She smiled, slow and warm. You asked me to take a walk. Bruce blinked, the words sinking in like stones in water. She was right. He had asked. He'd taken a step, small maybe, but his own. For the first time in years, Bruce felt something shift inside him. Something that wasn't duty or obligation. Something that felt dangerously like hope. They walked back in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. When they reached the edge of the park, Denise paused, her smile lingering. Thanks for tonight, she said. Bruce nodded, his voice low. Thank you. As she turned to leave, Bruce almost called after her. Almost asked if she wanted to do this again. But the words stuck, heavy with fear and possibility. Instead, he watched her walk away, her figure fading into the twilight, and thought, next time, I won't almost. Chapter 8. Cracks in the armor. Bruce Hamilton prided himself on control. He kept his life neat, predictable, and free of surprises. But control had a way of slipping through your fingers when you least expected it. It started with a phone call at 7:15 a.m. on Thursday. Mr. Hamilton? The voice on the other end was calm, professional. The kind of calm that made Bruce uneasy. We've had a systems failure in the East Distribution Hub. Routing is down. Orders are backing up. Bruce sat up in bed, adrenaline spiking. How bad? Bad enough that corporate wants a fix by noon. Bruce was already pulling on his shirt. I'll be there in 30. By the time he reached the hub, chaos had bloomed like wildfire. Forklifts sat idle, pallets stacked like abandoned towers, and a cluster of managers hovered near the main terminal, their faces tight with panic. Bruce dove in, fingers flying across the keyboard, his mind a blur of codes and contingencies. For 3 hours, he wrestled with the system, patching errors, rerouting orders, barking instructions to anyone who would listen. By 11, he had the hub limping back to life, but the cost was written all over him. His head throbbed, his shoulders ached, and his phone buzzed with texts from Emily. Mom says you look like death. Eat something. Bruce ignored it. There was no time for food. No time for anything except fixing what was broken. By the time he stumbled out of the building at dusk, the sky was bruised purple, and Bruce felt like a hollow shell. He drove home on autopilot, his thoughts a tangled mess of numbers and deadlines. When he pulled into the driveway, Emily was waiting on the porch, arms crossed. You look like a zombie, she announced. Bruce grunted. Long day. Emily eyed him, then smirked. You need a distraction. Bruce frowned. Emily? Too late, she said, holding up her phone. I already texted Denise. Bruce froze. You what? She's on her way, Emily chirped, breezing past him into the house. You're welcome. Bruce stared after her, his pulse thudding. He wanted to be angry, but all he felt was tired, bone-deep tired. And maybe, just maybe, a flicker of relief. 20 minutes later, Denise knocked on the door. Bruce opened it, and for a moment all the noise in his head went quiet. She stood there in a soft gray sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, her expression warm but concerned. "Emily said you had a rough day," she said gently. Bruce exhaled, the tension in his chest loosening just a fraction. "That's one way to put it." She stepped inside, her presence like a bomb against the chaos. "Sit," she said, her tone firm but kind. "I'll make tea." Bruce blinked. "You don't have to." "Sit," she repeated, pointing to the couch. For once, Bruce didn't argue. He sank into the cushions, his body heavy, his mind still buzzing with half-finished tasks. He heard the clink of mugs in the kitchen, the soft hum of Denise's voice as she asked Emily where the tea was. Felt strange, comforting, like someone else was holding the weight for a moment. When Denise returned, she handed him a steaming mug and sat beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her shoulder. "Drink," she said. Bruce obeyed, the heat seeping into his hands, his chest. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the quiet broken only by the tick of the clock and the distant hum of traffic. Finally, Denise spoke. "You don't have to do everything alone, you know?" Bruce stared at the mug, his throat tight. "I've been doing it for so long. I don't know any other way." Her voice softened. "Maybe it's time to learn." Bruce looked at her then, really looked, at the kindness in her eyes, the strength in her smile, the way she seemed to see past the armor he'd worn for years. And for the first time, he wondered if letting someone in wasn't weakness. Maybe it was survival. They talked for an hour, about work, about family, about the weight of promises made to ghosts. Denise didn't offer platitudes. She listened. She understood. And when Bruce walked her to the door, the air between them felt charged, alive with something he couldn't name. "Thanks," he said quietly, "for being here." Denise smiled, her eyes warm. "Anytime." As she stepped into the night, Bruce felt the cracks in his armor widening. And for once, he didn't try to patch them. Chapter 9, The Almost Kiss. Bruce Hamilton had never been nervous about family gatherings. They were predictable. Food, laughter, Emily's dramatic stories, Sophie's sarcastic commentary. But tonight was different. Tonight, Denise was there. It wasn't his idea. Emily had accidentally invited her when she texted, "Game night at our place. Bring snacks." Denise, being polite and apparently fearless, said yes. Now Bruce was standing in his living room, watching Denise laugh at one of Emily's ridiculous impressions, and wondering how his house suddenly felt too small for his own heartbeat. The game was charades. Emily insisted on teams, girls versus Bruce. Sophie was referee, which meant she was scrolling TikTok and occasionally shouting, "Time!" without looking up. Denise was up first, acting out something that involved dramatic arm flailing and a very convincing impression of a chicken. Bruce guessed wrong 3 times before she collapsed on the couch, laughing so hard tears streamed down her cheeks. "It was Rocky," she gasped. Bruce blinked. "How was that Rocky?" Emily smirked. "She was doing the training montage." Bruce shook his head, smiling despite himself. Denise's laughter was contagious, bright, unrestrained, the kind of sound that made the walls feel warmer. By the time the game ended, girls won, obviously. Emily declared victory and vanished to the kitchen for snacks, dragging Sophie with her, which left Bruce and Denise alone on the couch, the air suddenly thick with something that wasn't laughter. Bruce cleared his throat. "You're good at charades." Denise grinned. "You're terrible at guessing." He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Fair." Silence settled, not awkward but charged. Denise shifted slightly, her knee brushing his. Bruce felt the contact like a spark, sharp and unexpected. He looked at her, really looked, at the curve of her smile, the warmth in her eyes, and something inside him moved, slow and certain. He leaned in, just a fraction, just enough to feel the pull, the gravity between them. Denise's breath hitched, her eyes flicking to his mouth, and Bruce thought, "This is it." And then, "Who wants nachos?" Emily's voice exploded from the kitchen like a grenade. Bruce jerked back so fast he nearly fell off the couch. Denise blinked, her cheeks flushed, her lips parted in something that looked suspiciously like disappointment. Emily barreled in, carrying a tray piled high with chips and cheese. "Extra jalapenos." "You're welcome." Bruce stared at the nachos like they were the enemy. Denise bit her lip, hiding a smile that made Bruce want to laugh and groan at the same time. The rest of the night passed in a blur of snacks and laughter. But Bruce couldn't shake the moment. The breathless pause before reality crashed in with jalapenos. When Denise left, she gave him a smile that lingered like a secret. "See you soon?" she said softly. Bruce nodded, his voice low. "Yeah, soon." As the door closed behind her, Emily flopped onto the couch, grinning like a cat with cream. "You were so close." Bruce shot her a look. "Emily, don't worry," she said, smirking. "Next time, I'll make myself scarce." Bruce groaned, but inside, hope flickered like a stubborn flame. Next time. There had to be a next time. Chapter 10. Denise's doubts. Denise Roberts had never been good at ignoring questions once they lodged themselves in her mind. Tonight, one question refused to let go. Can Bruce Hamilton make room for someone else when his whole life is built around responsibility? She sat on her couch, legs tucked under her, scrolling aimlessly through her phone while the thought gnawed at her. The almost kiss replayed in her head like a scene on loop. The way his eyes had softened, the way the air had thickened between them, the way Emily had detonated the moment with jalapenos. It wasn't just attraction. Denise felt something deeper, something that scared her a little. Because Bruce wasn't like the men she'd dated before, the ones who promised fireworks and delivered smoke. Bruce was steady, solid, the kind of man who showed up when it mattered. But what if showing up for her meant not showing up for his family? Could he do that? Would he even want to? Her phone buzzed. A text from her mom. How was game night? Denise groaned, tossing the phone aside. Her parents were relentless, and maybe they weren't wrong. But she needed clarity. About Bruce, about herself, about whether this was a spark or a slow burn destined to fizzle. Across town, Bruce was pacing his kitchen like a man preparing for battle. Emily had gone to bed, leaving him alone with his thoughts, and his phone, which sat on the counter like a ticking bomb. He wanted to text Denise. He wanted to tell her he'd enjoyed game night, that he'd wanted to kiss her, that he wasn't sure how to do this but he wanted to try. But every time he started typing, the same fear stopped him cold. What if I can't give her what she deserves? Bruce had spent 17 years being the man of the house. It wasn't just a role, it was his identity. His mother still leaned on him. His sisters still needed him. He couldn't just step away. And yet, when he thought about Denise, her laughter, her kindness, the way she'd looked at him on that walk, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope and terror. The misunderstanding came the next morning. Denise was at her parents' house, sipping coffee and trying to dodge her mother's knowing glances, when her father casually mentioned, saw Bruce at the hardware store earlier, said he's fixing up the house again. That boy never stops. Her mother smiled. He's devoted. Denise forced a laugh. Yeah, very devoted. But inside, the words twisted. Fixing the house. Always fixing. Always working. Always carrying the weight. Was there room for her in that picture? Or would she always come second to a list of responsibilities that never ended? She left her parents' house with a knot in her chest and a question she didn't want to answer. Meanwhile, Bruce was at the hardware store, buying supplies for a leaky faucet, when Emily called. Did you text Denise yet? She demanded. Bruce sighed. Not yet. Emily groaned. Bruce, come on. She's probably thinking you're not interested. Bruce rubbed his forehead. It's not that. I don't want to start something I can't follow through on. Emily was quiet for a beat, then said softly, maybe she doesn't need you to fix everything. Maybe she just needs you. Bruce stared at the phone, her words sinking deep. Maybe Emily was right. Maybe he was overcomplicating this. But before he could decide, his phone buzzed with a new message. From Denise. Hey, can we talk? Bruce's heart kicked hard against his ribs. Talk. That could mean anything. Everything. He typed back, of course. When? Her reply came fast. Tonight. Walk. Same place. Bruce stared at the screen, the knot in his chest tightening. Tonight, he'd get answers whether he was ready or not. Chapter 11. Bruce's Leap. Bruce Hamilton had never been good at grand gestures. Flowers felt cliché. Fancy dinners felt hollow. If he was going to do this, if he was going to show Denise that she mattered, it had to mean something. Something real. Which was why, at 6:45 p.m., Bruce was standing in the old park with a thermos of hot cocoa, 2 mugs, and a blanket tucked under his arm. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't Instagram-worthy. But it was theirs. The place where they'd walked, talked, and cracked open pieces of themselves they'd kept locked for years. He checked his watch. 10 minutes early. Typical. He hated being late, but tonight he hated waiting even more. Denise arrived at 7 sharp, her breath curling in the cold, her scarf fluttering in the breeze. Bruce's chest tightened at the sight of her. Simple coat, hair loose, eyes bright despite the chill. Hey, she said, smiling. You came prepared. Bruce held up the thermos, feeling oddly self-conscious. Thought it might be cold. Her smile widened. That's thoughtful. They walked to the footbridge, the same spot where they'd stood before, and Bruce spread the blanket across the bench. Denise sat, tucking her hands into her lap, while Bruce poured cocoa into the mugs, the steam rising like a promise. For a moment, they sipped in silence, the quiet stretching between them. Not awkward, but heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, Denise spoke. I wasn't sure you'd come. Bruce frowned. Why? She hesitated, then said softly, because you always seem pulled in 100 directions, like there's never room for anything else. Bruce stared at his mug, her words hitting like a punch. You're not wrong. Denise's voice was gentle, but steady. I don't want to be another responsibility, Bruce. He looked up then, meeting her gaze. You're not. Her brows lifted. Then what am I? Bruce's throat tightened. He'd spent years carrying weight, holding the line, being the man of the house. But tonight, For the first time, he let the truth out. "You're someone I want," he said quietly. "Not because I have to, because I choose to." Denise blinked, her breath catching. "Bruce," he leaned forward, his voice low, raw. "I've spent so long making sure everyone else was okay. I forgot what it felt like to want something for myself. And then you walked back into my life, and He broke off, shaking his head. "I don't know how to do this, but I want to try." Silence. Then Denise smiled. A slow, luminous smile that made Bruce feel like the ground had shifted beneath him. "You're doing fine," she whispered. Bruce exhaled, the knot in his chest loosening. He reached for her hand, tentative but sure, and when her fingers curled around his, it felt like the simplest, most extraordinary thing in the world. They sat like that for a long time, hands entwined, cocoa cooling in forgotten mugs. No fireworks, no grand declarations, just two people choosing each other in the quiet. For Bruce, it felt like a leap. For Denise, it felt like landing. Chapter 12, The Confession. Bruce Hamilton had never been good at speeches. Words were tools, not ornaments, meant to build, fix, solve. But tonight, as he walked toward the park for the third time in 2 weeks, he knew words were the only thing that could fix what mattered most. Denise was already there, leaning against the railing of the footbridge, her scarf fluttering in the cold breeze. She turned when she heard his steps, her smile soft but cautious. That caution hit Bruce like a weight. He hated that he'd put it there. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he replied, his voice low. He stopped a few feet away, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, heart pounding like it wanted out. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of wind and the distant hum of traffic. Then Denise spoke, her tone gentle but steady. "I needed to talk because—" She hesitated, then met his gaze. "I like you, Bruce. I really do. But I can't be in something where I'm always second to everything else." Bruce's chest tightened. "You're not second." Her eyes softened, but her voice didn't waver. "You've spent your whole life putting everyone first. Your mom, your sisters, your job. And that's incredible. But where do you fit? Where do I fit?" Bruce swallowed hard, the truth clawing its way up. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been the man of the house since I was 9. That's all I know. But—" He stepped closer, his voice rough with honesty. "When I'm with you, I want something different. I want—" He broke off, searching for words that didn't sound like a cliché. "I want to choose you. Not because I have to. Because I want to." Denise's breath hitched, her eyes shimmering in the dim light. "Bruce," he closed the distance between them, his hands trembling as he reached for hers. "I can't promise I'll get it right. I can't promise I'll stop caring about my family. But I can promise this. I'll make room for you. I'll fight for that. For us." For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then Denise smiled, a slow, luminous smile that made Bruce feel like the ground had shifted beneath him. "You don't have to fight alone," she whispered. Bruce exhaled, the knot in his chest unraveling. He lifted a hand, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her skin. Her eyes fluttered shut, and Bruce thought, finally, he kissed her. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't cinematic. It was slow, tender, and real. The kind of kiss that felt like a promise kept after years of silence. When they broke apart, Denise rested her forehead against his, her breath warm against the winter air. "Worth the wait," she murmured. Bruce smiled, his voice low and certain. Every second. They stood there for a long time, hands entwined, hearts steady in the quiet. For Bruce, it felt like stepping into sunlight after years of shadow. For Denise, it felt like finding home in a place she never expected. And for both of them, it felt like the beginning. Chapter 13. New Year, new beginning. The Hamilton house was buzzing with laughter, the kind that spilled from room to room like sunlight. It was New Year's Eve again, 1 year after Bruce had stood in this same living room, quietly sipping coffee while his sisters made resolutions he never understood. Tonight, everything felt different. Emily was in the kitchen, orchestrating snacks like a general commanding troops. Sophie lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone but smiling every time Denise laughed. And Bruce was standing by the fireplace, watching Denise chat with his mother, her voice warm, her smile easy, like she belonged here. Because she did. Dinner was loud, messy, and perfect. 2 families crammed around the table, trading stories and teasing Bruce until his ears burned. Denise sat beside him, her hand brushing his under the table. A small touch, but enough to make his chest tighten with something that felt suspiciously like joy. After dessert, Emily clinked a glass for attention, her grin wicked. "Okay, everyone. Resolutions." Groans filled the room, but Emily was relentless. "Come on. It's tradition." Sophie smirked. "Mine's to survive Emily's TikTok fame." Emily shot her a look. Rude. Denise laughed, then turned to Bruce. "What about you?" Bruce hesitated, then smiled. A slow, steady smile that made Denise's heart skip. "Mine's simple," he said. "Make room for what matters." Emily swooned dramatically. "Ugh, that's so romantic." Bruce rolled his eyes, but Denise squeezed his hand under the table, her smile saying everything words couldn't. Later, When the clock struck midnight and fireworks bloomed across the sky, Bruce and Denise slipped out to the porch. The night was cold, the air sharp with winter, but Bruce barely felt it. Denise stood close, her breath curling in the dark, her eyes bright with reflected sparks. "Happy New Year," she whispered. Bruce smiled, his voice low. "Happy New Year." He kissed her, soft, certain, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise kept. When they broke apart, Denise laughed, her cheeks flushed. "What?" Bruce asked, amused. She grinned. "Emily just texted me." Bruce frowned. "She's inside." Denise held up her phone, the screen glowing with Emily's message. "Tell him to propose before next New Year." Bruce groaned, burying his face against Denise's shoulder, as she laughed so hard she nearly dropped her phone. "Don't worry," she teased, her voice warm against his ear. "We've got time." Bruce smiled, his arms tightening around her. For the first time in years, he felt like the weight he'd carried had shifted. Not gone, but lighter. Because now he wasn't carrying it alone. And as fireworks painted the sky, Bruce Hamilton, quiet, steady, devoted Bruce, finally let himself believe in something he'd almost forgotten: new beginnings.